the Chancellor keeps talking about fiscal rules. Nobody understands about fiscal rules. I said, of course they understand about fiscal rules. Everybody who's got a mortgage understands about a fiscal rule. It says if you don't pay your mortgage, you lose your house. Yeah. Everybody who's got a credit card understands the fiscal rule. If you don't pay your credit card bill, you get hit by enormous interest and then the credit card folds. This is being able to explain this narrative to people, being honest and upfront with people.
Welcome to the Policy Fix. I'm Steve Rigby, Chief Exec of Rigby Group, one of the UK's leading private businesses. So I'm here today with Rupert Soames, the President of the CBI. He comes from an amazing background, having led Greco and Serco, and currently is Chair of Smith & Nephew. His background is very much one of transformation, and we're here today to talk about his journey and his perception on how we can help fix some of the key issues in the country today. Rupert's a big personality, he's well known in the world. I'm sure it's going to be a super interesting conversation. On to today's episode. So Rupert Soames, welcome to the Policy Fix.
Hello.
Hi. I think the first thing to turn to, if we can do, your career has been obviously fascinating. You've had many significant jobs, many in FTSE 100 organisations, more recently in the CBI. But the one thing that's common is they've all been turnarounds in the last period of your life.
Well, that's maybe the only people who would have me.
What's led you to that? I mean, it's a different style of business, certainly. A style often I run away from, if I'm being honest with you, rather than running towards. So why have you run towards that restructuring, turnaround environment?
I think it was because what I learned to do. And my first public company that I actually ran was a wonderful company called Greco. And it was just in trading terms, not doing very well when I joined it, but then went on to do incredibly well. And then having got a reputation there, I was then put my hand up to go to Serco, which was in deep trouble as an organisation because it had fallen out in a major way with its largest customer. And then I retired and was very fortunate to be asked to go and be chair of a very good organisation called Smith & Nephew, which is a medtech company. And then, having thought that my life was sorted, I was rung up and said, do you know anybody who might like to run the CBI at a time when the CBI had just been through a very difficult phase? And I said, no, I didn't. And then rang back the headhunters the next morning. I said, well, maybe me. And I've had the most brilliant couple of years doing that. But I think it's because, you get to become, I think there are different types of managers. And I think there are some skills around going into organizations that for whatever reason have lost their way or are in trouble. There are skills that you can bring to that. There's different ways of approaching it from going into companies that are doing incredibly well.
So let's circle back to the CBI shortly, but let's focus on Serco. It's a huge organisation in running many parts of government.
About 100,000 people.
100,000 people, one of the largest employers in the country. Yeah. So tell us the challenges that you faced there and how did you tackle that turnaround?
Well, there's nothing like falling out with your customer. And Serco was delivering primarily government services to government, and it was discovered that it had been doing so in a less than straightforward manner on a couple of contracts. And government went on the warpath to go and put that right. And that putting it right involved changing all the management. And I came into that to find an organisation that was in rather the same way that I find the CBIs. Very often you find that people who've not been involved in, who think the organisation is really great, are perplexed to find that maybe in corners of it wasn't so great. And it was made more complicated, I think, in Serco because it wasn't just a reputational thing; it was also a strategy that had gone wrong.
Mm-hmm. Too much diversification.
So too much diversification, and I saw Hawley by the time I'd gone from 100,000 people down to 50,000 people, which was basically taking it back to government services. But I learned a huge amount there, and the people in Serco taught me a huge amount about service businesses and about how to maintain service levels in very, very difficult work. I mean, let me tell you, when you're on G-wing on a prison
Yes.
at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's a pretty tough gig. Actually, it's much tougher at about 7 o'clock in the morning when everybody's coming out of their
And I'd
cell.
imagine attrition is an incredible issue in Serco. You're dealing with lots of relatively low-skilled roles. So, 50,000 people, originally 100,000.
Well, I want to challenge that.
Yes.
First of all, the attrition was, yes, it was bad in places. And secondly, there's nothing low-skilled about being a custody escort officer. There's nothing low-skilled about having to do deep cleans in hospitals.
Yes.
There's nothing low-skilled about having to drive trains.
Yes.
So we did everything in government. But I resist the idea that those frontline jobs are low-skilled jobs.
I'm sure you're right. I mean, as you say, they're really at the front line in many situations, but they're often low paid, which one probably associates the two together incorrectly in this situation.
Correct.
Yes.
A lot of them are not are low paid, and people work hard for the money.
Yes.
There is this tension between on any business between you have people delivering incredible levels of service and value to shareholders and customers who are not paid very much.
Yes.
But I think there's an element of how much could you really reinvent the world. But what I think you can do in the way that you think about an organization, particularly in a turnaround, is recognizing that if you don't get into the head of, if you don't get into the hearts and minds of the people who are delivering the service, then it's never going to get better. And I rather like that expression, saying the customer's experience will never be better than the employee's experience.
Yes.
So if you have with an organisation employees who are being treated badly, being abused, being treated disrespectfully, don't actually be surprised if they in turn do that to the people that they're dealing with. So I think one of the things that I have taken from the organisations, the large organisations I run, is that you really have to break out of the what's that dreadful word, the C-suite. You have to be able to relate to and communicate and listen to people who are delivering the service. The people. So if you go and take Serco during COVID,
yes,
Serco was running a lot of critical government services.
I'm sure, yes.
90% of Serco's workforce in the UK were working in their workplace right the way through COVID, through lockdowns and everything like that.
Yes.
They had to be there because they were running critical national infrastructure. They were looking after asylum seekers. They were running prisons. Can't just say, I'm terribly sorry, I'm feeling a bit sick today. We're not going to go and open up the prison.
Yes. I think there was a lift in public opinion. We were thanking our cashier clerk at the supermarket and clapping for our nurses. There was an appreciation, I think, in COVID, wasn't there, for these roles that perhaps aren't highly paid but are incredibly important.
Yes, I think if we sort of keep coming back to pay, we started the conversation, this bit of the conversation around not about pay, but about respect for the skill.
Yes.
I respect enormously the skill with which, for instance, I remember going to the Old Bailey once, and their Serco people take people who are appearing in front of the courts from the cells, and they sit with them in court. And they've got some really big and difficult people that they are dealing with. And the most skilled people are women who you could only describe as petite. And that they are tiny, and they are handcuffed to these enormous giant thugs who are accused of a terrible crimes. And they are incredibly skilled.
Yes.
At managing them.
But not with force, but with...
And we have one terrible incident on my watch where actually a woman custody officer was murdered by somebody. But we never got over the fact that it was a skilled job managing people who were at enormously stressful times of their lives and making that process professional, stable, bearable, and non-violent.
Yes. Let's just turn our focus to the CBI. So your last role, you're stepping down in your current role at the end of this year, and you've done 2 years in an important phase of that organisation. So, for those of you those listeners that didn't understand the CBI journey in 2023 and the challenges that you came into, perhaps you might give us a little bit of background. But it represents the most important business organisation facing government in the UK. But it did go through this crisis of confidence in the period that you started in that. Certainly as a member and as someone that works alongside the CBI, I see a very different organisation today, back, if not to its previous strength, if not further and beyond that. So give us a little bit of flavour of the
really
organisation.
Pleased to say that, and it's nothing to do with me. It's because they've got a fantastic team of very talented people, led by Rain, who is the CEO there, and a very, very skilled set of economists and policy makers, people who help government with policy. And so here was an organisation. If you are a member organisation, if you lose the trust and confidence of your members, and also if you're a lobbying organisation, if government doesn't want to speak to you, that's pretty terminal, and that's the position that we were in. But to my amazement, it didn't last long. And it didn't last long for two very good reasons. One is that the members wanted it. The members felt the need for the CBI to survive, and they were the people paying the subscriptions. And government needed it because it needed to have that channel of interaction with business in a organised and thoughtful way. So when you have that combination of your members wanted to survive and government wants to survive, actually it's quite easy to say, well, shall we say we just survive?
Yeah, I mean, even the banks were needed to survive, so the banks supported the organisation.
The banks
through
were huge.
The journey.
The banks were helpful. So very lucky from that point of view. But we've been doing good work. And in the first year I was there, we had an election, and the then opposition needed a lot of policy input, and the government at the time needed to be aware of what business was thinking. So it was pretty hectic. But it got back to normal again very quickly. Now, people often say to me, Rupert, does government listen to you? And my answer is they listen attentively when you're telling them what they want to hear. And if you go on to ChatGPT, you'll find there are 8 different styles of listening.
Okay.
And when you go in to meet any minister or civil servant, you never know quite which one you're going to get. But it is right and proper. I mean, everybody's got a role to do here. Government is elected to go and deliver a mandate. But there's a sort of subtext also going on and say, don't screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's often this tension between what the manifesto says and the reality of how you then go and
govern.
those.
Yeah.
I think that the great strength of the people sort of imagine that the CBI spends a lot of time schmoozing with ministers. Actually, the most important work we do is working with civil servants on the policy side. And if you go and take something that is as seminal for business as, for instance, the Employment Rights Bill,
yes,
all 300 clauses of it, which is incredibly dangerous as a piece of legislation to businesses' ability to go and dangerous is the wrong word. It's prejudicial to the willingness of business to employ people. Actually, the only way you deal with that is down in the detail.
Yes.
of the subclause 5A, 5B.
Which is,
standard.
I mean, very difficult language to read, I have to say, as a layperson. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it really
So
is.
you need somebody.
You need technical detail.
You need
yeah.
technical detail,
Yes.
and we've got sort of policy experts, and we've got employment experts,
Yes.
and the like who can engage on that sort of stuff.
I went to your office this week actually and did your home day, and it was myself and Sam Lister, who runs the industrial strategy,
Yeah.
talking to your staff, and the quality of questions coming from quite young people to us both was incredible. The detail they were asking the questions, it was really impressive to see.
They're deeply impressive people, and as you say, a lot of them are young, and they are mixing it with really serious, momentous decisions. They feel that they've got an input here, be it on trade, be it on employment law, be it on taxation, where we think that we've got ideas that are helpful to the government. Now,
Yeah.
some the government will listen to, and some they won't. But you have to try, and a government that doesn't listen properly is going to miss out on something, particularly, I have to say, if it's a government like this one, where the level of experience of working in business amongst ministers and amongst MPs is really, really low. Very few. Some of them do have significant experience.
But we both come from business. Department of Business and Trade. 5 new ministers and junior ministers. Nobody in that structure has business experience, and it is difficult to engage, which is why the civil service is important. Just if we perhaps move away from CBI for a moment and talk about your view between business and government, I think we both approach things probably from a business perspective, where we're used to setting strategy, we're used to setting a budget, we're used to setting a direction for an organisation, empowering people, recruiting talent around us. Some of those things feel relatively similar in a government environment, but the parallels stop there because business and government are very different.
Not. So I have lived in both environments. I've been brought up in a political environment because my elder brother's a politician, my father was a politician, my grandfather, my great-grandfather was a politician. So very much a hefty political. And I, from the get-go, from when I left university, went into business. And they are profoundly different disciplines. And I think it's one of the things that the CBI does and does well. I say we act as the Google Translate between government and business. But it works both ways because I spend as much time of my time explaining to business people what it looks like from a government point of view, because a lot of business people think that government can just be run like a corporation, and it jolly well can't be. You can't. It's a volunteer army, and there's a very good assertion about MPs. When you're in an election campaign, particularly if you're in opposition, your candidates are employees, and when you won, they become self-employed. Because they have their constituencies and it all becomes much more difficult and complicated. The politics of it, aka persuading people to support you, become much more complicated. And these are complications that people in business don't see. And likewise, people in politics don't see the complications of it. I mean, the blank disbelief that sometimes I see in the eyes of politicians when I explain to them about the effect of maybe some elements of the employment rights, but that people have a choice as to whether they go and make job offers or not. They have a choice to whether they're going to go and pick people, some of the 9 million people in the UK at the moment, of working age who don't have a job. More importantly, within that 9 million, there's 1 million of people between 16 and 24 who are not in education or employment or in training,
yes.
And making job offers to people like that who may have that this is a risky thing, and they look at you and say, nah.
Well, I mean, obviously the government's focused today very heavily on growth. Whether every department is, I think, is questioned, but certainly Number 10 and Treasury and DBT are focused on growth. Yet things like the Employment Rights Bill are clearly an anti-growth lever. So how do you balance that environment where we have a left-wing government? Clearly their policies are around working people, around workers' rights, with that need to grow the economy, which is what business is all about, and us wanting an environment where you're used to working for large organisations that treat their employees respectfully, treat them well, and we're trying to crack what appears to be a nut here with a sledgehammer around employment rights bill, which is even the government's $5 billion of negative economic activity coming on the table with this change. How do we get those messages through as trade associations?
Well, I think we have to work with persuasion. I think we have to work with facts. When people's beliefs collide with facts, say if you go and look at facts about what is happening now with the employment tribunals, if you want an employment tribunal case now, you're getting a listing in 2028. Saying to MPs, who many of whom are well-meaning and want to do the right thing, just explain to them, is if people run a risk that they are going to be when they hire somebody for the first time, and while they are working out whether they're going to, both sides are working out whether it's going to work for them, the employee can walk away. The employer is saying, but so should the employer be able to walk away if it's not working out. Now, of course, there have been abuses of this in the past, but sledgehammers and nuts go to that. But let's only concentrate on that. Let's also talk about, shall we, the really difficult position that the Chancellor finds herself in.
No doubt.
It's not, very little of it is, some of it's of her own making, of the government's making, but a lot of it is not. And one of the things that I have been boring people, why my social life has disappeared rather in smoke, is because I believe that this issue, that politicians, particularly the Conservative Party, were not honest with people about the costs of solving the global financial crisis and of COVID. There was an opportunity immediately after COVID for the government to say, we've had to go and borrow £400 billion to do the furlough schemes and everything like that. And this is going to be a curse and a burden on our children. And we, in our generation, have the responsibility to pay that debt back. If we are not going to say to our children, dear children, good luck with your lives. We had a thing called COVID, and we decided that we weren't going to pay for it and let you pay for it instead. And what is now happening in the, as it were, the good ship Great Britain, is that there is this large cannonball rolling around on the deck, which is the interest payments on that.
£107 billion.
Well, no, it's not only that, but in 2023 it was half the cost of the defence budget, and it's now
Twice.
double the cost of the defence budget, and it's swinging all over the place, which makes it really difficult. And the CBI, as a CBI does very well, has put together a 40-page document that's gone to Treasury to say, we think that you should do this and that, and the very right suggestions on tax and how to, don't just tinker, let's have some proper reform. But I take a rather simplistic view of this, is that as a way of communicating to people how you might communicate a budget where you're going to have to raise money. It would be really helpful if the government made a commitment to one in, one out.
Yes.
£1 in from tax, and we're going to take £1 out from public expenditure.
People can understand that. It's
they can understand that. And the fact is that the Labour government has many, many skills, but controlling costs of government is not one of them.
45 billion of tax rises last year. We're probably expecting at least 40 billion of tax rises this year. When I talk to people, they don't think it's the end. And that the challenge is, because there is no one in, one out, that we have a situation where, we have this ballooning position now approaching 38% tax take, heading towards 40. We're already, from an OECD point of view, I think 31st of 38 countries.
But you're talking about the income side of it.
Yes.
If I said to you, so when this government came into power, it knew it was going to have to control public expenditure.
Yes.
Now, there's a fact, simple but true and not often acknowledged, that particularly in government, costs walk in on two legs. Now, you would have thought that government, knowing that it had to go and control public expenditure, would have made sure that the number of people employed in public services would not have increased on their watch. You might say, okay, in the first year it'll go up maybe a couple of thousand. There are now 230,000 more people working in the public services now, in the public sector than there were a year ago. Mm-hmm. And you can blame. I think political parties have things that they're good at and not good at, mm-hmm. and fundamentally, a lot of the Labour MPs have come into power. They have not come into power to save money. They've mm-hmm. come into power because they believe in the ability of government to make things better, to spend money. And they are just not getting to grips with, in my view, the costs of running government. And that's why I say one in, one out, because, and I think we as businessmen tend to concentrate on the income side, the tax side of it. Mm-hmm. But it's really important if we are to go and reduce the level of, have to look at both, and they've got to be effective at both. There are 118,000 fewer people paying PAYE now than there were a year ago. And I think that the government finding a narrative where it can be seen and have it a credible narrative about how it is going to save money.
And the closer we get to an election, every day that passes now, the less chance there is of taxation reform or structural change in the way we deliver services. And clearly the Labour Party is under substantial pressure internally and externally. So how do we get that agenda through? I mean, for me, again, focused perhaps on the income line for government, it is really clear that these changes, these tweaks that we're doing in every budget, 40, 50 tweaks, have huge unintended consequences. The biggest for me, as you know, is business property relief on family businesses, but there are many others. That obviously national insurance is a structural change that happened, but these small tweaks that are happening, I think, can have very significant unintended consequences. So how do we get the government to think more structurally about tax, the income line, and about the costs, the way we deliver services? Do you feel you've made progress in the CBI on those points?
Yes. I mean, I think that we'll find out when the budget comes out. I think it's very easy to to be harping from the sidelines to understand. So sometimes government. I personally have a belief that government was, that the dropping of the thresholds on national insurance, which was the really big.
It was a gotcha.
Yeah. It was actually just an error, a mistake that happened at the last moment. I think so. Well, if we do this, we'll raise another bit, and I didn't realise the seminal effect that was going on. But there are some really bright and intelligent people looking at this. I think one of the things that the organisations that the CBI can bring to this is that the trouble is when business people approach government individually, government kind of immediately thinks that they're after something.
Yes.
In the 10 years that I was running Serco, I never had a meeting with a minister that did not have at least 2 civil servants there. Mm-hmm. It's just the way that it works, and quite properly and rightly too. So the idea that you can have organisations like the CBI which go and bring together policy that represents the interests across the economy is really quite useful to government. How much they listen, I think that, as I say, they listen attentively when you're telling them what they want to hear. But
in our own way, Family Business UK does the same thing. I mean, we're trying to represent the small number of issues that our members really want us to focus on. For you, the challenge is, and you do have a large policy team, you're really trying to represent every style of industry across every issue, which presents a hugely complex agenda.
You have to go and pick your issues.
Yeah.
Now, if you go and take Family Business UK and BPR, Family Business UK commissioned our economists to go and do a report, which actually I think was a big and actually pretty well-respected report on the effect of BPR and the unintended consequences of it. But what we try to do at the CBI is think about cross-sector issues like planning and regulation,
yes,
and the like, and then work in partnership with trade associations who will have much more specific issues. If you go and take, for instance, the British Retail Consortium,
It's an important trade association.
really important trade association. It does a very good job of representing the retailers, but actually the retailers' case around rates and around employment
A minimum wage.
a minimum wage are shared across hospitality. They're shared across many of your businesses. They'll be shared across. So it's picking out those issues that go across the economy.
Yes.
That is the important thing there.
So, Rupert, as you probably know, our family business is 50 years old this year. We're very proud of that.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. It's quite an achievement. Not quite
CBI's
as...
60 years old.
Is it really? Okay,
yeah,
that's
so
good to
we
hear.
almost started at the same time.
And my father set the business up in the West Midlands, and I've taken that as a sort of charge in life to sort of try and help that region philanthropically, economically, and I believe very strongly that the regions hold much of our future. Like you, I feel there's a bloated state. We're now 600,000 civil servants, and actually empowering our local representatives and empowering our citizens, importantly, for their futures is really key. Perhaps can you just share your own experience in the regions? You're now running a regional organisation that has lots of outreach, but perhaps give me your thoughts on where the regions factor in.
tell you, I've literally just come last night. I was speaking at a CBI dinner in Bristol for the southwest, and next week I'm in Wales, and the week before I was up in Sheffield. So it's on the joys of my life as I get to sort of travel around the country. Can I just pick up on your use of the word empowering?
Yes.
Empowering. And when I go and talk to mayors and people like that, it sort of tends to get the impression that their job is to get more money and resources from central government. And central government just likes that vibe.
Mm.
It
likes being in control.
It likes being the big provider and being able to dosh out things. I think one of my favourite songs, not particularly suitable to this analogy, but it'll do for the moment, is the Eurythmics, doing Sisters Doing It for Themselves. Mm-hmm. When you go meet people out in the regions and see the skills and the power and the very significant industries. I mean, you go down to the South Wales, you've got Airbus, you've got GCHQ at Cheltenham, you've got Hinkley C being built, you've got a vast amount of renewable energy and IT and manufacturing skills there. I mean, they can sort an awful lot themselves. It's not all about money.
They can, but
it's also about inspiration. It's also about helping other business, as you do in your work. You go and help and be an inspiration to other people. And I think we slightly got on a regional basis into this thing that is all about money. Now, it may be all about infrastructure. Maybe only government can go and do the infrastructure. But there's a lot else working with universities and and industry, putting those together, that regions can do for themselves and should be. Take control.
If I look at somewhere like Plymouth, though, in the southwest, it has, I think, a 22-month reading age gap with their children. It's white poverty. It lacks commerce. How do you fix those issues, which are really big societal issues? How do you fix those issues without money? Surely money is the start of that change in a societal area. So just, again, really to sort of push back, if I look at the single settlements that are happening right now. Yes.
If you go and take education, on which I am not a great expert, but we all know that the quality of schools in the public sector is very much driven by the quality of the governing body and the quality of the head teachers that they recruit. Mm-hmm. So engaging at a local level that is much more powerful in terms of the effect that it's going to have. Engaging with the council, if there are big gaps around different types of housing, who's responsible for that? Is that Whitehall? Whitehall would love to think it's responsible for it. Actually, it shouldn't be. It should be done by... But Plymouth, actually, people last night were extolling the virtues of how well Plymouth is now doing.
Well, I hope it is. I mean, it's certainly the numbers on education talk for themselves. But again, if I look at the West Midlands where I'm focused, they're desperate to get their numbers for their single settlement, not yet come through yet. And they're almost in paralysis about making decisions. Yeah. So things I'm involved with them on economic development or philanthropy, they just can't make those decisions because there's no forward-looking budget for the organisation. Yeah. So surely we've got to get more devolved capital.
So there's a very good. I agree. It's got to be more devolved. But there are some really good examples of devolution of things where it has not worked as intended. And one of the things that I would point to is the devolution of responsibility for the NHS to the devolution into Wales, into Scotland, and into Northern Ireland, where those governments have signally failed to take responsibility or rise to the challenge of running their health services better than NHS England.
Yes, agreed.
And the standards have slipped and the performance have slipped because fundamentally the politicians who have been running those bars are fundamentally uninterested in how to actually run large parts of government. They wanted to get the politics right, and I am highly critical. I really am. And I know Scotland very well.
Yes. But Scotland's a good example where Scottish Enterprise, sticking in the business swim lane we both know well, is a great organisation.
Yeah.
They've really done some great things. Next to Greater Manchester, I think they're probably the shining light. So,
but see what they've been seeing what's happened to the NHS in Scotland.
Yes.
I mean, it really is not good. See what's happening to education. And I thought my hope around devolution was chopping things up into smaller bits, making them more accountable to local people, would make them run better, would make politicians be interested in running these organisations better. It turns out it hasn't turned out that way.
The danger is, though, it's more centralisation, bigger civil service, more command and control, which also doesn't feel the answer.
Absolutely, I'm saying that actually one of the challenges that I mean, I'm too old to do it. You're still a spring chicken. That you need to rise is getting hold of, but getting this thing of encouraging devolved authorities to not to be empowered by others, but to grab power.
Yes.
And to do it themselves with what they've got. There's a very good expression in the U.S. Navy: "Do the best you can with what you've got."
Yes.
And the Nelson at Trafalgar, before Trafalgar, sent a signal to his captains, basically saying, if in the fog of war, basically, I'm not sure what was whether you lose contact with the other ships of the fleet, no commander can ever go wrong by laying his boat alongside the enemy and opening fire. And so this idea that if in your situation where you haven't got the settlement of it should not be an excuse for paralysis.
But we agree that a smaller centralised state and devolution, which for me is also about talent, and I fear we're not empowering our regions to allow them to recruit the right people. Recruiting into chief exec roles or senior leadership roles in combined authorities or local authorities is a hard job. Often they're in some form of distress or some form of financial hardship. So putting talent in is difficult. But if we can devolve into talented organisations, that's got to be a better solution in the midterm.
Yeah, so what are you doing about it?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly trying to support my region. There's only so much you can do in your own capacity, but helping mentor some of their talent is actually really important.
Look, you are one of the most successful business people in Britain.
Yes.
You have a strong sense of place,
yes.
and you are rooted and grounded in the West Midlands. Of course, you can. You have huge heft and so on. Yes. But what I would encourage you to do, is to be encouraging of others. There's a very good description of what the purpose of a board is.
Yes.
A purpose of the board is to make executives brave.
Yes.
And the purpose of people like you and me,
yes.
when we are interacting with people in the where we live,
yes.
is to help people have the courage to be brave and ambitious.
But I don't know how you find it, Rupert. I had dinner with 12 chief execs last week, 12 of the top 50 chief execs in the UK of private businesses. And I asked the very question, who will put their head above the parapet with me? Who's going to step forward into the breach? And there's such a reluctance in public companies for people to do that for obvious reasons. They have shareholders, but also in private companies, people are reluctant to really put that head above the parapet. But we do need more people doing it.
I would agree. And I think people are reluctant. And it suits me because I'm not.
Nor am I.
And I'm not reluctant to do it, and it has from time to time got me into trouble. And I know that there are probably many civil servants and not a few government ministers who think that I'm a pain in the arse. But it just sort of comes with it. But I am at least trying to make things better and to make a contribution. Yes. And I think that the point is that just harping from this from the sidelines, just saying, "Oh, it's all dreadful. Why doesn't government run itself more like my business?" is actually not doing anybody any good.
I mean, this overused phrase "critical friend," I think is a factor for both organisations we work within. But I think that balance between what I would call kicks and kisses is really important. You can't just criticise.
You've also got to compliment. Finding the areas where government is not looking. Find the areas where and not providing and getting on and providing. So one of the things that I want to talk about in a moment is my favourite charity.
Yes.
So my favourite charity, and I have a family interest here because my wife runs it, is chair of it, is called the Bucks Association for the Care of Offenders.
Yes.
And it goes back to the days when Serco, we ran a lot of prison, and then Millie, my wife, became a prison visitor, went to see people and became very knowledgeable about it. And the Bucks Association for the Care of Offenders is an archetypal local organisation. It basically looks after offenders who are in prison in HMP Aylesbury, Spring Hill and Greenham. And for a home county's place, Buckinghamshire has a lot of prisons and a lot of prisoners. What it does is it deals at a human level in a way that it's very difficult for the probation service or the government to do. So when a prisoner is coming out on day release to go and have interviews, BACO will step in and help them buy a suit. BACO will make sure that will help them buy some shoes. When they are in prison, it may help them have a radio so that they can listen to that. One of the most touching letters that I've ever seen was from a prisoner writing to say thank you because BACO had provided him with a duvet and a pillow.
Yes, well, I mean, yeah,
and it's these little things. Now, nobody gives a stuff on the grand scheme of things. Does government say you can't do it? No, but a million little things, contributions, can do a huge amount of good.
Well, I'm a firm believer in the third sector, the charitable sector. It plays a critical part, actually, in service delivery in many parts of the country. As you know, we run a foundation, as your family does. In fact, we run a couple of foundations. Ours are focused in the West Midlands, and we're lucky to be the biggest philanthropists there. One of the differences on this show is we're giving a donation for your time, which in turn you're giving onto BACO. But where does philanthropy sit in your heart, and what role should that play, and what advice can you give to other philanthropists?
So the philanthropist in our family is my wife. She's really good at it because she combines being knowledgeable and good about it, much better at it than me. I just sort of stand back with amazement and see the work that she and the charity she works with are in. But one of my top tips, and there will be people listening to the show who give quite a lot of money to charity, either through a foundation or directly, is top tips comes from an American I met who said, always carry a checkbook. I said, what do you mean always carry a checkbook? Nobody pays with a checkbook. He said, because you can go somewhere and you meet somebody in conversation and you think, this is a good person. Okay? So take out your checkbook, write across it. It doesn't matter, £500, £1,000, £5,000, sign it, give it to them and say, you fill in the charity that you want to give this to. Now, actually, when you think of that as a way, you're giving money to somebody that you trust is going to spend it really, really well. Give Millie Soames £5,000. She will spend it really well. Better than any charity board or trustee board because she knows the local geography. She knows where it's going to make a big difference. And for people like you who are big philanthropists, you will have a structure where you have trustees and everything like that. Just carry a checkbook.
My piece of advice in this situation this week, in fact, we've launched something called Cradle Career, which is a really important charitable initiative, which we've led. But in the process, we've got the combined authority to put £6 million in we've convened Jaguar Land Rover, we've convened 2 other local philanthropists. And that convening power, when you're a large organisation in a region, it's incredible what you can achieve, not just on your own, but that takes time.
This goes back to the earlier point I was making, where you were saying about devolving and government empowering local things. And I'm saying, here is an example where you have done an amazing thing.
Yes.
You've just taken the power and got on with it.
Yes.
And there is so much in life that we don't have to, if we wait for government to do things, we're doing what government really wants, which is to leave them in control, which is not necessarily a great idea. And sisters are doing it for themselves. We're getting on and doing it for ourselves and creating real good and having an impact, at least, rather than just sitting there and saying, well, we're waiting for a block grant.
What's interesting in this situation, I've been frustrated by the timescales, but we've done it in a year. It took 3 years in Liverpool to do the same thing. So and the reason that's happened is because I've been pushing like crazy in the background to make decisions, get it through boards. And I think the private sector, working with the charitable sector, it can be a really powerful combination. And that's where people do need to step forward.
Of course it can, and of course they do, and you are doing that.
Yes.
And I'm doing it far less, and I'm full of admiration for it. But what I do perceive is that this country for the future, we need to think of ourselves in a different way. And part of that way is being nimble. And part of that way is not having central government empowering people, but people empowering themselves to go and do things. Because there are groups, the CBI dinner last night in Bristol was full of really, really capable, powerful people who can get together, who can go and form groups and say, we're going to do this for ourselves.
Yes. No, we definitely need to empower our communities more, that's for sure. So Rupert, the name of the show is The Policy Fix, so let's perhaps end our discussion on some things that we both think collectively are important for our politicians to consider moving forward. So you talked earlier about 1 in 1 out. Can you perhaps expand on that a little bit more?
Yes, it is that we have a responsibility not to leave to our children and grandchildren a massive amount of unsustainable debt. And I think that part of the discourse that the government needs to have is to be able to explain that to people. And if we are in an environment where taxes are going to have to go up, I think it's not unreasonable to say that costs have got to come down. And this government, as I say, I don't think it's been very effective at controlling government costs, but to have a principle, if we're adding 10 billion to tax, we're going to take 10 billion in real terms off the expenditure. That will help on the debt side. There's another thing that I'd like to really focus on, which is civil service reform. I think one of the lowest moments in my sort of sitting outside as an interested bystander of the world of politics was hearing principally conservative ministers slagging off their civil servants and treating civil servants with disdain. That is not my experience. My experience of civil servants is roughly the same of people in government and out. It's the rule of 5. That for every 5 people, you find 1 who you actually say, I'm going to drop everything, I'm going to follow you, I think you are so brilliant. You find 3 who are just about in the middle of the road doing a job, and you find 1 where you really think you ought to ring up the head of the civil service and this person is a danger to the nation. But the fact is that the civil service has expanded greatly, hugely since 2016. There are by about 30%, 124,000 more central civil service, and it's developing a lot of the symptoms that bureaucracies do when they become self-serving. Is that everything has to be to get anything done, you need more people. Where form is more important than function or output, where success is always claimed by the centre and failure is always dissipated to the periphery. And actually, it would be God's work to set about...
They're strong words.
God's work would be to set about and bringing back to the civil service this respect for the importance and quality of work that they do, that the nation needs them to do, but the responsibility they also have to be well managed, effective and productive.
What's interesting in business, we've operated with covenants, banking covenants for all of our existence, and they keep you honest. They make sure that you either have to hit your revenue number or you have to hit your cost number, because ultimately it's some form of multiple of profitability and cash management. The government's just got there. That's what the bond markets are doing today to the government. And if we were businesses and we couldn't drive that revenue line further, the one thing we would have to do is attack our cost base. So your principle of one in, one out, I think is very relevant, because ultimately that's the way most people have to operate. Every household operates that way. If you can't pay your electricity bill, you have to sacrifice something else.
I had a politician that said to me the other day, the Chancellor keeps talking about fiscal rules. Nobody understands about fiscal rules. I said, of course they understand about fiscal rules. Everybody who's got a mortgage understands about a fiscal rule. It says if you don't pay your mortgage, you lose your house.
Yes.
Everybody who's got a credit card understands the fiscal rule. If you don't pay your credit card bill, you get hit by enormous interest and then the credit card folds. This is being able to explain this narrative to people, being honest and upfront with people. There's a guy called Juncker who was a commissioner, was actually head of the commissioner at one stage in the EU. He had a wonderful said, we all know what the solution is. We haven't just figured out how to get elected after we put it into place.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. That's very true.
And I think that we do need to be, so my big fixes are, one is being able to have analogies and communicate honestly with people what a fiscal constraint is, in a way that they're going to get, and a way that is, and secondly, turning the central civil service into a productive, talented, highly well organised, productive organisation that is significantly smaller than it currently is.
Well, I think your one in, one out message is really simple. Like it is on asylum seekers, it's a really clear message. We put £1 in, we take £1 out. That's clear to happen. If the civil service is to shrink, back to our earlier conversation, for me, part of that solution, that political fix, is a real belief in devolution, which isn't just about money, it's about talent. It's about putting the right people in our regions that can operate with a much larger budget. You talked earlier about Scottish and Welsh health. In those situations, we've got to have the right leadership in place to make those organisations work effectively.
Yeah, and you have to have right political leadership in those regions that care about it. And my experience of some of the devolved administrations is that fundamentally the politicians didn't really care about the major government operations that they had been entrusted to run.
Yeah. Rupert, amazing job in the last 2 years in the CBI. They're going to really miss you. Hopefully Rain's sticking around for a long time.
Well, and I've got a fabulous successor. My
Yes.
proudest thing at the CBI is that Cresta Hogg is going to be my successor.
Very well. I look forward to meeting you, but thank you for your time. If you enjoyed today's episode, click here to watch the next one.